So everyone just missed all of that, I believe. So it's just a mouthing head. Essentially, today we're going to be covering osteoporosis, bone density. So no matter what age you are, whether or not you have osteoporosis, we want to help make sure you don't get it. So we're going to talk about 3 tips that are going to help you build your bone density, whatever stage of life you're in. Make sure you do consider subscribing to the channel. So there's the notification bell just under here that you can hit, so you make sure you don't miss out when we go live in the future. And with that being said, we'll get straight into today's live stream. So with that gaff out the way, let's get into today's live stream. So why is it important? And if you're ever watching and anything's messed up, then do please post in the comments below, because Lara's behind the camera. She can see all your comments and everything, so she'll be able to tell me, hey, you've left the mic on mute, which is very inconvenient. So today, how to deal with low bone density. The most important thing here is that we avoid it. That's the best part. There are certain risk groups, which we'll get into later, but we want to know, why is bone density important? Who is vulnerable to having low bone density? How can you build it at different stages? And how can you maintain it? And I mentioned, I think while the mic was muted, that if you're part of the premium Back in Shape group, then you'll start to see that some of the stuff that you're doing later on in that phase 2 stroke phase 3 in particular will really start to things will start to click with regards to why certain things are included. So that's really awesome. And remember, we'll do our Q&A at the end of this live stream. Just so if you've got any questions, if you haven't been able to get the help you need with your back pain, then we can go through some stuff and hopefully give you some answers and some guidance on those issues. So why is it important? Bone density is really, really important because it's essentially the strength of your skeleton. Now, we actually did a full video on osteoporosis in particular. This was at the request of a patient who had some younger family members, and she was interested on, can we build it? And we mentioned a bit about it in clinic, and then said, okay, we'll do a video to talk about it. So the very first thing is, I'm going to go into how to build it from a young age, because especially in ladies, it's a little bit more important, because we have menopause later on in life, possible changes in estrogen levels, which really influences the way in which our bone is broken down and then not relayed at the same pace. So when you're in your early teen years, 12, 13, 14 or so, you lay down approximately 30-35% of your bone density. So it's super important that at that stage in life, younger girls in particular, because it's a case of use it or lose it, and girls will start to lose their bone density a little bit faster than boys because of the reasons that I mentioned. But it's a case of building up that bone density as much as possible when we are in our early teen years, so that we have more to lose over our life. And that happens in both men and women. They'll lose bone density gradually through life. But girls tend to be a little bit less active. So it's all the more important that they are instructed and supported and guided as to the importance of things like physical exercise, good diet, and those sorts of things, because it really, really pays dividends later on in life. So if you've got any younger children or grandchildren or anything like that, then it's really important that they are building up their bone density. Good diet, vitamin D, calcium, and exercise are the 3 super simple, really easy ways to build that bone density at a critical, pivotal age. So very, very important there. Now, who's vulnerable? We've already spoken about this. It's going to be ladies that maybe aren't on HRT. It's going to be ladies that get into during and after the menopause. It's also those that are very inactive. If you've led an inactive lifestyle, the rate at which that bone density has been eroded, whether you're a man or a woman, is going to be decreasing in time. And often we see people with lower back issues, more chronic lower back issues that are a little bit older, will have some element of reducing bone mineral density. And this is often diagnosed as osteopenia, which means that it's lower than it should be. And this is done through a DEXA scan, which you can normally arrange through your GP if you're concerned about it, especially if you're in a risk category, or you can get it done privately, which is super easy and it's not too expensive. And I would argue, if you're concerned about it, it's definitely something, if you've got the funds, it's worth just monitoring these sorts of things as we age. So that's really important. That's who's vulnerable to it. Now, I want to make this as helpful as possible. So we'll run through sort of the main 3 things that you can do to improve your bone density. The first one is for everybody. It's a case of supplementing vitamin D or improving the levels of vitamin D. If we're out in the sunshine for longer periods, which is really possible right now, if you're on lockdown and you're allowed to go outside and have exercise, it's beautiful weather outside, plenty of time to manufacture subcutaneous vitamin D. So being in the sun helps your body develop vitamin D in of itself. And vitamin D is used as a hormone, and it affects around about 5% of our body's gene expression. So it's a super, super important one, let alone for for bone density itself. Now you can also supplement vitamin D, and it's very, very inexpensive. You can get those from places like Holland and Barrett. You can get higher end supplements online as well, more liquid supplements. So there's tons of companies out there that sell vitamin D, and it is really inexpensive. I can't on today's live stream, but I believe we pointed to it in the full osteoporosis video. But where was I going with that one? That was vitamin D. Never mind, that'll come back to me. Completely lost that train of thought. But it was to do with vitamin D, very, very important. It was about, that was it. It was about supplementing it. If you're in the UK watching this video, it's about supplementing it from around about September through to March. There's less sunlight, especially if your heritage is from a more sunny country. So if you're from Southern Europe or anywhere warmer than that, then you really should be considering supplementing vitamin D from around about September through to March. We don't get enough sunlight here in the UK to manufacture it ourselves, so supplement it. And it's, as I said, it's super inexpensive to do. So that's the number one thing to do, because that does affect your bone density. Now, the next one is more so for those ladies that are post-menopause, possibly lower estrogen levels. And this is specifically with reference to a research study. And you see it on the board behind me. They had ladies that were supplementing around about 40 milligrams of calcium a day. And it's just calcium pills. It's nothing, no drugs, anything like that. It's just a calcium supplement. And by increasing the dosage to 800 milligrams a day, it was a substantial impact in terms of maintaining bone density in that group of ladies, which is really, really important, because as you move into the menopause or post-menopause, there is going to be that decline in bone density, especially if you're not on HRT. And even if you are, there's going to be some element of decline anyway. And these sorts of supplements are very, very inexpensive, but they really can maintain your bone density. The last one that I wanted to cover with you guys is probably the most important, because it costs you absolutely nothing to do. It's free for everybody. And if you're watching this, there's a good chance that you've got some degree of back issues or have had over the years, and that is joint-specific adaptation and loading. And this plays directly into the back and shake protocol. And that is to say that a lot of times when they evaluate on a DEXA scan the bone mineral density, the areas they look at are the lumbar spine. They actually, interesting enough, don't always look at L5. It's commonly L1 to L4. And they look at those hips. And in the back and shake protocols, you'll know that you'll be doing, especially in phase 2 and phase 3, some load-bearing exercises. Putting load through this section of your body, supported by stronger and ever stronger muscles. And that load through these particular joints stimulates what's called the osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Basically, there are two sets of cells. One breaks down the tissue, the bone, and the other remodels the bone along stress line. And it's been proven, doesn't matter what age it is, if you are doing joint-specific loading at that level, you will increase the bone density, which is a really awesome bit of knowledge. But what we often find is people tend to get more inactive as they age, so they don't tend to benefit from that joint-specific adaptation. So as you're starting to do some of those load-bearing exercises in your exercise regimes, whether it's the back and shape in phase 2 and phase 3 with us, or something else, that loading through those joints really helps stimulate your body to start to lay down a little bit more healthy, dense bone in those target areas, which would be the lower back and the hip joints as well. Two areas that are commonly start to become worn as we get older. So really, really important one there, which is free to do for absolutely everyone, and everyone should be doing that. It's very, very important and very, very effective as well. So just to recap this overall for today's live stream, and then we'll go into Q&A. Bone density is so important because it's decreasing with age. We can build it up when we're in our teen years quite aggressively. We build most of it, and then it's a case of losing it steadily through life. The vulnerable groups are ladies in particular, and those that are very, very inactive, especially in latter years. And if you combine being inactive and being female, you're going to be more vulnerable than others. The second one is, how do you build it? Well, we've discussed vitamin D supplementation, or just being out in the sun is really, really helpful, because vitamin D has impacts on your bone laydown and your bone density. We've got the supplementation of calcium, which is obviously the constituent of bone. So that's particularly useful in the older postmenopausal group. And then for everyone, some joint specific loading, that is to say physical exercise on those particular structures, the lower back, the hips. It'll impact all the bones, but all the bones that are under that load, like you will be in the latter stages of the back in shape process. And those are the three things that you can do to improve your bone density, avoid low bone density, and the consequences of it. So that being said, we'll get into Q&A.
Okay, great. Alex has asked on YouTube, what about swimming? Is that often recommended because it is not strength?
So that's a really, really good question, and it's something that really should be discussed with your GP because they should know better. The reason that, because it's commonly the GPs that recommend that, the physios will maybe go through a bit more actual exercise. Swimming is great because the problem with a patient that's coming in with back pain and the GP's maybe only got 5-10 minutes max to talk to you, they can't tell you everything. So they want to get you doing something. So they get you in the swimming pool. The big problem with swimming pool is there is no load on the joints. So how are you hitting that last one? You're not doing the most effective one for everybody is that joint specific loading adaptation. And you're actually not doing joint loading, you're doing joint unloading. This is the whole reason you get the guys that go up to space, people like Tim Peake is the British astronaut, they will lose the strength, the durability of their skeleton because it is under less loading for extended periods. Now, yes, you're not up in space for 6 months, okay, while you're in the swimming pool, but you're trying to do something to improve the overall health of your lower back, the joints, etc., and you're deliberately decreasing that bone strength. And if you're a lady, then that's something that you really do want to consider. What is the place of swimming? Now, if you're doing swimming alongside some physical exercises, some load-bearing exercises, then that would be a sensible move because the swimming allows you to work your cardiovascular system in a way that doesn't involve too much impact. And that way you can focus the impact to maybe your back in shape workouts or something like that. But swimming as the be-all and end-all of way of staying fit and healthy and keeping your back pain free is I would say, a questionable strategy.
Okay,
yeah, sure. I'll repeat the questions, guys. The question was about swimming.
Followed on, I swim.
I think rambling is kind of like walking through the hills kind of thing. So yes, that would be good. You just want to make sure that there is some specific sort of slower, more focused exercises to strengthen up those muscles and bones and joints. So by the way of some controlled resistance work to improve that. Quite a lot of people do the walking and rambling, I believe, is just sort of through the countryside, which is good, but it would be better to spend a little bit of time as well doing that specific targeted work. I think it's very difficult to consume too much vitamin D. The question was, can you consume too much of the vitamin D and calcium? I would say yes, you can, but I definitely look at your, thanks for knocking the screen there.
Sorry.
I definitely look at your, it wasn't an earthquake. I definitely look at your, at the recommended daily allowance on the vitamin D and the calcium supplements that you are taking. And if you are in a risk group, then taking your advice from your GP would be suitable. But in that example that I referred to earlier, the 800 milligrams daily, that was a medical research paper that was done. So one can assume that if you're in that category, then 800 milligrams would be an appropriate dosage. But discuss that with your GP if you are using it for medical purposes.
Okay, next question from Ollie. Is just walking enough to build bone density? What are the safest exercises to start with if you're in a condition?
So the question there was about, is walking enough to build bone density? And I'd say it's not really. The whole point of walking is that it's lower impact. You're just putting your own body weight through those joints. It depends on where you're at with regards to your own back pain. If you're in trouble, and we generally use this as sort of a guide. If you can't get out of bed, so if you're struggling to get out of bed and you can't walk outside and you're just stuck to the house, then you need to get into doing the phase 1 exercises. Forget about bone density for the time being. Work on reducing the inflammation in your lower back. If you're able to go for a short 15-minute walk, then you want to move into sort of what we call the phase 2 in the back in shape protocol, and that's where you should start. Really, the bone density building type stuff really comes into the phase 3 of the back in shape protocols, and it takes some people 2 or 3 months to get there. It takes other people a little bit longer. It really depends on you, your own adaptation, and how your body is reacting to things, and how long you've had the back pain as well.
Okay, great. Joe's asking a question here. Is the load bearing
So the question there was about whether the load-bearing exercises are relevant if you suffer from arthritis, and the answer to that is yes. You will still need to do that. The question, well, it's really a philosophical question for you more than anything else. I mean, you've got some wear and tear. What helps the wear and tear accelerate? Lack of movement. What often happens is a person will have a certain range of motion that's available at a joint. And because, especially in the hips anyway, in the knees, what happens is, let's talk about the hip. The hip has that much range of motion. Let's make that a little bit more clear. And what happens is the extension starts to be done less. Okay, so this little range of motion here. So what happens is it becomes painful when we hit this boundary because we never do that sort of movement. So we stop moving, and this part of the joint gets degenerated. And then we move less frequently, so this part starts to be disused, this range of motion, so we stop doing it. And because when we hit this range here, all of a sudden it starts to become painful, so we back off again and we move less, and then this part isn't being used properly, so that becomes a bit more degenerated and painful, so we move less. And you can see how slowly you just remove and you're only left with a very small range of motion in the hip. So if you've got arthritis, quite often it's because you're not effectively moving those joints. There's not the appropriate bathing of the synovial fluid. All around this hip socket here, we have synovial fluid inside of a synovial membrane, which is providing nutrients to that joint surface. And we need the hips to go through a full, nice range of motion. Notice in the Back in Shape stuff, we're working on your flexibility of your hips, so they stay fit and healthy. So if you've got osteoarthritis, you need to move through good ranges. And osteoarthritis isn't increased bone density. That's a degenerative process which is different to the bone density. So I would say they are separate issues, but you should always listen to your body. Sometimes building these things will take a little bit longer if you've got some elements of degenerative change in the body.
Okay, brilliant. I think that's it.
So there was one more question that I know was on, I think it was on the Facebook or the YouTube. There was a question from Samuel on foam rolling. Are we against foam rolling? So I'll cover that one quickly now. I'm not generally against foam rolling. You might have seen we've got the Hypervolt in and around here, which we use at home. This thing, there's basically the massage guns. This is a really good one. Use that. My big problem with foam rolling is that if you've ever done it on your lower body, you do it after a workout, you've done your workout, you're feeling nice and good, and you get the foam roller out, you're trying to relax, you roll your lower body, and all of a sudden your upper body is exhausted because you have to roll yourself on the foam roller. It's just something that's quite arduous for the body and not particularly relaxing. When you've got these sorts of tools like the Hypervolt, or there's other brands, Theragun, and there's other cheaper brands as well that you can get off Amazon, when you can just sit there and do it on yourself, it's so much more relaxing. You don't end up getting a workout from the post-workout routine. So I think that foam rolling is great if you can comfortably do it, but I find personally it's more difficult and it's more hassle than it's worth. I don't feel relaxed afterwards. I don't feel lack of tension because I've had to work so hard to roll myself on the foam roller. Now that might be a little bit of a lack of skill when it comes to foam rolling, but if you're talking about someone with back pain who's maybe not as mobile as they otherwise could be, it's going to be a lot of hassle, and you're much better off sitting in a chair or on a bench using one of these and just going over your legs, over your upper body, etc., to get that same, and I would argue much more beneficial effects from using one of these than there is from using the foam roller. So that's just my opinion. Those sorts of guns have been out for a little while now, and they sort of are quite popular nowadays, and I think they do replace the use of a foam roller. That being said, a foam roller is about 10 quid. Those cost anywhere from 100 to 600 pounds. So it does vary in cost. But I will say that we've had a couple of patients that go ahead and buy those online, and they really do use them very, very well, and they become an invaluable tool.
Just one more question from
Yep.
Alex on YouTube. Alex said, I get a clunking noise from the hip in some exercises. Is that like kind of
No, if that's kind of, I had someone ask that on the membership site on the dead bug exercise. As you're lying on your back and you're straightening your leg out, that clunking experience is actually quite normal. As long as it's not painful, invariably it's going to be the tendons on the front of your hips just flicking over bits of bone, normal bone, nothing abnormal. You can see that this area isn't necessarily the most smooth, so things can flick over different places. It can just be gas bubbles that have built up in the synovial fluid in the hip as well. As long as it's not painful, then we generally say that's okay. That's something I actually experienced on my right hip. It's not really a problem. But if you play around with the angle that your leg's going, a little bit of internal or external rotation, move it away from the midline or towards the midline, you'll find that you can find a groove in which you can move it without that clunking or with minimal clunking. Make sure you're engaging your core as well, so that your back's not moving, to mitigate against any issues in the lower back while you're trying to focus on the hip. But the clunking is actually quite common. A lot of people do notice it. Awesome. Well, hopefully you guys have found today's live stream helpful and forgotten about that awful start with the microphone muted. So thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. If you do find these helpful, do please consider subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell just so you don't miss any time we do go live. We go live every day, but there's some slight variations on the days that we do it. If you're watching this after the fact, then please do post in the comments below if you've got any questions about bone density. Have you got reduced bone density? Have you had a DEXA scan? What worked to help improve your bone density? Did you get it remeasured after going through some of these sorts of protocols, calcium supplementation, vitamin D, etc.? And as always, have a great afternoon, and we will see you tomorrow, probably in the morning, with another live stream.